Hello, and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. I'm going to start off by asking you a question, and I'm going to partially answer that question, but not completely answer it. And the question is this: when did music start? How long ago was there music? How far back in antiquity does music go? Where do the instruments first get started? You know, there's a gradual progression of the instruments. The instruments today are more developed and more complicated than the early instruments were, but there always were instruments. So if you look back in biblical times, the Israelis used instruments all the time. They were singers and they were instruments. As a matter of fact, if they were going to war, a lot of times they would put the musicians ahead of everybody else. They were the first to go into war. Now, if you look at the Bible, you find out that the Bible talks about certain kinds of instruments. And I'm just going to kind of read this off here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it too clearly. But the Bible talks about drums, banging of drums. And it talks about cymbals, the clanging of cymbals, so we know what they were. It talks about horns. Now, these were probably trumpets. The Bible talks about trumpets. They were probably like horns, like you would find at a fair or something where you just blow through them and they make noises. And of course, David played a harp. It was actually called a lyre, L-Y-R-E. It was like a miniature harp with strings that he could pluck. So we know that these instruments were in use: drums, horns, cymbals, harps, and so forth. And of course, there are always the singers. And a lot of the psalms were written to be sung, not just to be read like we do today, but to be actually sung, and also the instruments behind them. So we know that in antiquity there was music and there were a lot of instruments. A lot of them were percussion. A lot of them you blew into like a horn, or you banged on like drums, and played like a harp. But that leaves the question of where do the woodwinds get started? Flutes, oboes, bassoons, and ocarinas, and all of the instruments that I teach, the woodwinds. So I'm going to take you back and discuss what the ocarinas were like. The ocarinas are very, very, very old instruments, and they would have probably started the woodwinds. So way, way back in history, probably in biblical times, maybe more recent than that, though, the Chinese, the people in Africa did something when they started making ocarinas. Only they weren't called ocarinas. People called them globular flutes. And what they were, I'm going to take this down. What they were squarish or roundish, kind of like a whistle with an air chamber. Now, you've got to remember that there are no pictures of early instruments because they didn't have the equipment to do it. And as far as the Israelis were concerned, they did not want to make any images of their instruments anyway, because the Bible warned of not making any graven images. So what we have to do is go by the instruments in the cultures that surround Israel and surround the Jewish nation, because they were probably playing the same kind of instruments as the Israelis were. So we do have their sketches, and occasionally you see sketches of a lyre or a horn or a drum or something like that. So we have kind of a way of finding out what those early instruments were like. The ocarinas were made, first of all, in China or in Africa, some of the Asian nations, and they were called globular flutes. And what they were was roundish or squarish, like a whistle with an air chamber, and maybe a couple of tone holes so that you could make 2 or 3 notes out of them. They were very, very primitive, but they were probably the beginning of what the woodwinds were, I would suppose. They were roundish, they were squarish, called globular flutes, and I just have a rough sketch of what they were like. Now, what happened was, as they developed, they became known in the European nations. There was a man, his name was Donati, Brian Donati, and he was an Italian, and he changed the globular flute to a different shape, and he called it an ocarina. Now, I have a similar instrument right here. This was the ocarina, the shape. Now, we called it the ocarina because it reminded him of a loose goose. I don't know where he got it from, but at any rate, that's what they say. It means little goose, and for some reason it reminded him of that, so we called it an ocarina. The name ocarina has stuck, but in the United States, we call them sweet potato ocarinas. This is made out of plastic. I actually have two. It does not play well. I hesitate to play it at all. It does not play well, but it is an ocarina made out of plastic, and this was the shape. So I am going to try to play it. Don't expect a song, just expect some tones if I'm lucky to get them. On the back side of it, there are two holes. Of course, you're going to cover one with your thumb, and the other one would be acting like a labium. If it was a recorder, I would show you that little square underneath the mouthpiece where the air goes, that would be the labium. And this, I just cover it up. So I'm going to put my fingers on it. Now notice, there are lots of holes here. If I hold it like this, there are a lot of holes. And this was like the ocarinas. They developed, they got larger, they had more and more holes, they played more and more notes, and then by a few hundred years, everybody in Europe was playing ocarinas. Today's ocarinas are very, very beautiful. This one just happens to be like a sweet potato. They called them sweet potato ocarinas. You have to get your fingers on just right, and it's hard to do that. You can see the kind of tone it makes. Not very good, but at any rate, it does make a tone. You can make a scale out of it. In fact, it played badly enough that I bought another one. I thought another one would be better, and it plays exactly the same way. This is an alto in the key of C, but there's lots of holes to it. You have to keep making sure that you cover everything up exactly like it's supposed to be to get the tones you want. The lower notes are actually a little better than the higher notes. This is a sweet potato ocarina. And I do have other ocarinas as well. So let me show you something here. This is a mini ocarina. It's a very, very one of the tiniest instruments I own. It's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches square. It has one hole in the back, and it has a mouthpiece right here. It's hard to see it. Since it's dark colored, it's hard to see it. There's a little slit where this finger is. That's the mouthpiece. You put your hand on this, and you have 4 holes. There's a tiny one here you can barely see, and you put your hands like that, hold it. Oops, I got to get it right. And it actually plays a full scale in the key of C, and it's on pitch. It's in the key of C, and you could get a full scale out of it. Now, what you have to do is switch the positions of your fingers on those holes, but that's all right. It actually works. I actually have done solos on this instrument just for the fun of it. I can remember playing Alleluia in church on this instrument, and it was really, they were just blown away by the fact that it was so, so tiny, and yet it was so, so clear. Now, and it's got a good, sharp, clear tone for its size. And of course, what I did it with an accompaniment. There was some kind of an organ or piano playing in the background. So it really kind of stood out. So 4 holes. This is a labium, which you can't see because it's so tiny. My finger's right there. And then on here, the mouthpiece. It has a strap, you can wear it, you can wear it around your neck. Some of these ocarinas you can wear around your neck, and they're made to be worn around your neck. So you pick them up and you play it. This happens to be the smallest ocarina. It's called the mini ocarina, made out of plastic. The other real small one that I brought in is actually not an ocarina, but it is this kind of an instrument you just blow right into, and it's made by Hohner, and it has 4 notes. It's a C major scale, C, E, G, and then back to the C again. Four. And that's the smallest instrument that I own, actually. So you have the ocarinas and you have the other tiny instruments, and you just blow into them, and they're like a squealy sound, some of them. The modern day ocarinas are a little bit different. They play beautifully. You can play them like 8 inches long. They have them 8 inches long, 6 inches long, and they have a very, very, very beautiful tone. And so so you can get some that I wish that I had. I've tried to replicate some of the sounds of the modern day ocarinas because the sound is very beautiful, but I can't do it on my other instruments. They're wooden instruments, they're just calibrated just right, so the sounds are just right. So therefore, these are the smaller ones. Now we get to the puny tune. This is a puny tune, and the puny tune is an ocarina, but they don't call it that. It's made by a guy, his last name is Mumford, and it plays, this is a small one, it's 4 inches long, it has only 4 holes in it, and they're on the side. You have 2 holes here, you have 2 holes here, and you just hold it, and the combination, and the mouthpiece is right here, and it has a labium right here. They consider it to be a separate kind of instrument because of the shape. It's different than the other shapes of ocarinas, and it plays a full scale. This one, 4 inches, it plays a full scale in the key of C, pretty much on pitch. When they explain it to you, they say they try to round it out so that it's more or less in the key of C. Well, it either is in the key of C or it's not. It's more or less in the C. There's some variation in the tone. They do have a larger one that's 6 inches long, not 4, and that plays in the key of G. So I'm not gonna play anything on it, but just to show you what it's like. It's a very powerful, rich, and very nice tone for its size. So this is what they call a puny tune. It has a patent. They wrote a book for it, and I'm going to show you the book. This is the front cover of the book. It's a small one. What they did was try to draw it so it looks like an animal, like a pet. And they said the title of the book is The Puny Tune, A Guide to Its Care in Feeding. It's kind of a fun book. And if I open it up, you can see what they've done. They've drawn the puny tune to look like a pet. Now, this is actually a giant kind of fingering chart because it shows you the fingers you put down for certain kinds of songs. It has a list of songs here, Oh, Susanna, Home on the Range, those kinds of songs. And they have these little squares which represent the instrument, and they have 4 little circles for the holes that are in it, the tone holes that are in it, what you press down and what you don't press down, and you can play a whole bunch of songs. And the songs include, and I've told you a couple, but Amazing Grace, A Bicycle Built for Two, Red River Valley, Joy to the World, We Three Kings. There's a lot of Christmas songs in here. The First Noel, Away in the Manger, This Old Man, Yankee Doodle, Row, Row, Row Your Boat. And all those songs are available that you actually can play on it in pitch. If you know the combination of what you're supposed to do, of which fingers go down, which fingers go up. It's a little hard to get used to because of the fact that most of the woodwinds, the fingerings are right down straight. Here you've got half to your left, you've got half to your right, and you just fiddle around with it until you get the right notes, but it's all marked out in the fingering chart, and you can play all of those songs. And it's considered to be, this was showed in the Smithsonian Institute. It won some kind of award for creativity. It's really quite a nice instrument. If you go out for the ocarinas and play them, and you get them that are reasonably expensive, you can get some really beautiful ones that play really beautiful music. These are smaller ones, of course, but that's what they are the ocarinas. Now, this would start a progression toward the woodwinds, because what you're doing is you're blowing into something that has like a mouthpiece, like you would a recorder or a penny whistle, and then it has the little labium in the front, so you would be able to, where the air goes, and then you see holes on the side, like tone holes, and you can play all kinds of music. I have read that in World War I, that a lot of the sweet potato ocarinas were made and given to soldiers in World War I, so they wouldn't get lonely, so that they would have something to play, and they would be able to have some kind of music, and it would be an entertaining factor, so that you know, there's no TV, there's no electronics or anything like that. So they made bunches of those and handed them out to the soldiers. Now, I hope they played a little better than this one does, but they do play, and this would be the beginning. What do woodwinds have in common with other woodwinds? Well, you've got the mouthpiece, you've got the labium, you've got the holes on the side, you have to put it in your mouth, you have to tongue, and I have to say with this book, I mean, it's a very small book, and it's mainly made for entertainment. The instrument is real enough. It is for entertainment as well as teaching you how to play. But one of the first things it talks about is the necessity of tonguing. And I've gone over that some. If you're going to play, one of the first things you have to learn how to do when you play a note is how to tongue it. You can't just go slurring from one note to another note to another note. It doesn't sound very good. But if you can tongue it, and it goes into the tonguing process in here, and how you tongue, and it's the same as it would be for any other recorder. It's all explained out in this book. So all of these small instruments play like the woodwinds play. Anything that goes in your mouth and how you tongue it and how you breathe into it is the same. So the ocarinas, I think, were the beginning maybe of the woodwinds, and then it developed from there. The instruments became a lot more complex. You had things like penny whistles, which are simple instruments, but they play everything. You can play anything you want to on a penny whistle. And they are very versatile. This gets 2 octaves. Now, these little ones here, some of them get a full octave range in approximately the key of C or the key of G, and they're fairly accurate. They're not completely accurate, but they are very little. And then it just develops from there, and you get the more complex instruments, the recorders and the penny whistles, the sasutos, the song flutes. This is a little song flute right here, and it plays quite well. And so I've played solos on the song flutes. They can't do what the recorders can do. They could only get 1 octave. But you see that the quality of the tone is there. Then you started, they had holes in the back, so you, like this one does, like the recorders do, and that can kind of help you with other extra notes, or sometimes helps you with octaves. So this is the beginning of the woodwinds. And then, of course, the drums and the horns and the different types of percussion, they were there all along. The singers, the various instruments that I pointed out to you in the beginning of the class that were there. So this is the beginning of music. Way back in antiquity, music was always there. People always found a way to take sounds and make rhythms out of them. And then they made tones out of them. And then it progressed from there. And as society progressed, the complicated nature of the instruments progressed as well. So what was a simple flute became complex. It wasn't just you blow into it and get a noise. It became more and more complex as time went by. And so you get the instruments more complex. The recorders can play 2 octaves easily, and the penny whistles can, the sasutos can. All of those beginning instruments very important in the development of music. So where does music get its start? It gets its start way back in antiquity with drums that would beat for rhythm, and then the ocarinas, which would play just so that you could have notes and blow some tones out. It wasn't just a banging. And then the cymbals, which were always banging, and the horns, which you could probably get 3 or 4 notes out of, because a horn, or even like I brought in the carriage horns, I can get several notes out of the carriage horn. There were no valves or anything like that, but you just blow into it and it plays. So there's a gradual progression in time with the complexity of the music. You get harpsichords and you get pianos, which are more complicated than harpsichords, and it goes on and on and on. Even today's saxophones, and I'm a saxophonist, are different than the earlier saxophones. They have a different configuration of the keys. They play more notes, and the flute's the same, the piccolo's the same. So music gets started very early, and it was kind of already there. It never wasn't there because people saw it as soon as they were created to make noise, to join in, to have rhythm, and have tones. So it starts way, way back. And what we see now is kind of the culmination of how far these instruments have progressed, and especially when talking about the ocarinas, because they were so primitive to begin with. They were primitive. And then they developed so that they're very beautiful instruments. I wished I could afford to buy one of the modern ones. The tone is exquisite, very beautiful tones, and they play very well. You can play all kinds of music on them, very melodic music, and they're worth having. They're worth looking into. So I'm going to close it here. We don't have much time left, and then I'm going to kind of go next time into a general review, reviewing what the melody instruments are and how they are similar to each other and how you can gradually learn how to play them. What are the similarities? How do you play them? How do you finger them? How do you hold them? And then you just get, from there you can transfer your knowledge from one to the other, especially in the woodwinds. It's possible to do that. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.